Well, good morning. Happy Father's Day, everybody. It'll be 92 here today, but we had a nice, cool morning. It's about 60 at the moment. So, try to run the train while the railroad's in the shade. Just run the coal train this morning. Fire him up, and I'll move the camera around. You guys get a better view. Turn the engine on. Alright, we're going to pull out and I'll give you a series of run-bys. So let's just do a series of run-bys. So here's the train leaving the yard. So this is a small garden railroad, probably about the equivalent of a 2x4 N-scale layout, with a yard tacked on. So I just run loops, and when I'm ready to switch, I'll switch, and then I'll run back to the yard. That way it adds distance to the train. So we're exiting the tunnel. Unlike a 2x4 N-scale layout, I have to do a fair amount of walking to operate the layout. I really like having it elevated. Even though by the coal mine it's not that high off the ground, I don't know, maybe 14, 16 inches. It's so much more a pleasure to run than it would be if it was on the ground and maintain. There's the train going over the trestle, passing under the conveyor at Scott Coal. That's what we'll be switching here in a few minutes. And this is just like an overview of the layout. I thought I'd put it in there with the loop up above. And actually, there was a Norfolk Southern train coming. I thought, well, you might be able to hear the horn while they're blowing through town, but I don't know if you'll be able to hear it or not. It wasn't very loud. So again, the upper loop is just that. It's just a loop. It's supposed to be a coal mine train. I just turned it on and let it run. Just adds a little bit of visual interest. Another view running past the coal mine. It's a DT&I mileage marker on the back on the fence. I set the first post in June of 2016, so it's been 8 years. Of course, it was 2017 sometime before I ran the first train on the lower loop. That's the town of Hagens up on the right. This is just supposed to be a East Kentucky branch line of the N&W. So they crossed the Big Sandy River, which they did in 2 or 3 spots. N&W crossed into Kentucky for branches for the coal mine. And they still do. I think they've still got one active. Norfolk Southern has one active line that runs into eastern Kentucky. All right, so let's stop and do the switching. Those big trees there, it's hard to get a good view of it. So we just set the camera up on a rock and we'll just leave it in one spot. So the first thing you're going to see is me walking around the corner and uncoupling the caboose. I can't edit myself out of these, sorry. I can edit my hands out of the N-scale ones, but I can't edit my whole body out. So now we're going to pull up past the switch. You'll see me step in here and throw the switch. And then we'll back in and pick up the loads. Again, the layout height where that switch is I don't know, maybe 20 inches. That's a lot better than ground level. So just had an accidental uncoupling on the upper loop, and I was not paying attention at all. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. One of the couplers was maybe a little bit higher on one of the cars. So here I come around and crash into it here in a minute and start pushing them around, and I was just completely oblivious to it. So we're pulling the loads. After we clear the switch, I'll throw it and then we'll push the loads down to the caboose, which is just out of sight around the bend. As I narrate this, it's about 15 till 9, and the far side of the layout against that fence there on the right is just starting to get into sunlight. So we're uncoupling the cars. Again, G-scale, best way is just pick up one end. There's usually no trouble putting the car back on the track. It's so big. And about 90% of my layout is on a curve, if not more. So I haven't found a reliable method to stick down between the couplers and uncouple them. Now we're going to push the empties in. And there's a little bit of debris on the tracks I had to clean up. I did go around yesterday and trim a couple of the plants back that encroach over the track. Probably took me about 5 minutes. Now we'll uncouple the empties. Go to the switch. couple onto the loads, and after running a few loops, which I'm not going to include here, we'll go up to the town of Truett. I was just checking to make sure the caboose was coupled. We'll go to the town of Truett and do the runaround. While my N-scale layout tries to be pretty prototypical, my Garden Railroad is more fun. Hagen's was my great-grandmother's, well, my great-grandparents' name. My grandmother's, on my dad's side, that was her maiden name, was Hagen's. Truett was my great-grandmother on the, also on my dad's side, but from the male side, her maiden name. I've got Scott Cole, which was my grandmother. My mother's maiden name was Scott. I have Bartram Pulpwood, which you'll see later. That's another family name. So we left the caboose in front of the pond. The pond timer had not kicked on yet. I don't run it 24 hours a day. That's why you don't hear it. When I film the rest of the operating session this evening, when it's back in the shade, I'll show you the pond. The lily just behind the second coal hopper was really blooming beautifully, but I was in Indiana and my wife went to Ohio and didn't get any water for about 4 days, and it got pretty hot, and so all the blooms have died back. Hopefully it'll bloom again. So the locomotive has come back to pick up the caboose. The white building at the lower left was supposedly the Truett Depot, and back where you can see those rails right behind where the caboose is now, that's the foundation of the Truett Depot. When the railroad was going to abandon it, the lumber company bought it and used it as their office and moved it across the tracks. That's my story. And the two pieces of rail disconnected there, that's just an abandoned track. They used to have more yards in this area. I usually try to work it down into the gravel a little bit more. Alright, so we're going to tack the caboose onto the end of the train. Again, everything's on a curve, so sometimes it's not easy to get coupled and uncoupled. I body mounted all of my couplers, G-scale. In retrospect, maybe I should have left them truck mounted with all the sharp curves that I have, but they work okay. But there's places where, especially on the coal mine, there's sort of an S-curve. The locomotive has a tough time getting back there. The couplers are full lock in opposite directions. Alright, so here comes the locomotive, and I'm walking around the yard to get back over to throw the switch. locomotive is USA Trains. It has Rail Pro installed in it by Robbie Descott. Really like it. Sounds fantastic. G-Scale, you can have really big speakers so you can get more of the bass. So the train is now heading back to the yard, but that's going to have to wait. So later on this evening, when the railroad's back in the shade, I will film the rest of the operating session. And but right now, I'm going to go watch a soccer game, enjoy my day. So I'm going to put a picture of my stepson and his girlfriend who came down last night after this. Norfolk Southern train coming. Got my stepson, his girlfriend came down last night. My wife made a great dinner. We had a nice celebration for Father's Day. Unfortunately, my daughter couldn't be here. She lives in Arkansas. It's 11 hours away. But I know I'll talk to her later today. So happy Father's Day, everybody. Stay safe.